Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Committee of the Whole work session today, Tuesday, November 19th at 10:31. And on our agenda today, we have our minutes from our last meeting in October. And then we have some guests with us today from North Shore Waste. And I'm going to have our interim administrator, Rowan Watkins, introduce them.
So we have representatives from North Shore Waste here to give us an update, Rena and Dustin, and then we also have Dan from Ellers to talk through some bonding options as well. With that, I'll hand it over to Rena and Dustin.
Okay, well, I'll start this off, but Dustin will pick up here with the more detail. So the last time we talked, we said that we would go away, and you all approved some money for us to go and get plans done, which we've been working on literally since you first said that, and trying to figure out how to incorporate some of the other things that you all talked about. Like in the future, if you wanted to move the county's recycling operations there, how would that fit into the building? So some of that required us to really look at the original design of the building again, and some of the original goals. And so we'll go over, and Dustin can talk through that, but basically we looked at that by doubling the transfer floor space so that it was wider and more stuff could happen on that floor. That, in effect, affects all kinds of things. So one of the things that's been slowing us down a little bit is the architects have been working with the state and with MPCA about when you change the size of that floor, what does that do for rules around fire suppression and some other things. So trying to look at solutions that both keep the building and the workers safe, but also keep the cost down. Like a sprinkler system, for example, is extremely expensive for that size of a building, and the city of Grand Marais would not have the resources on hand. You'd completely shut down water in the city if you ever sprinkled that building. So you'd have to have holding ponds and big holding tanks, like 70,000 gallons. And so it added a lot of expense to that. So there were a lot of work has been done to create a 3-hour firewall and some other things that already meet the state's approval, because the architect's been talking to them and working on that. So once that building space was agreed to, and Dustin will walk you through that, some of those changes, then the rest of it can get fleshed out. They've been working on those pieces already, but they can't get down to where do the roads go and where does the electric go till they actually knew what that building was going to look like and get those cost estimates. We're still aiming to get you a good number by the end of this year so that you can make that decision yet this year. That's what we're all working toward, but that's why we don't have one today, because we've been wrestling around with fire suppression, basically. In addition to that, I think we also talked about, these other transfer stations on the other ends of the county. We're prepared to talk about that a little bit today too, whatever else. So when we're looking at funding or bonding for solid waste, it might, include these parts of the conversation. That's what our last conversation was about. So with that, I'm going to turn some of this over to Dustin.
Sure. So I think I'll address the other transfer stations to start. Down in Tofty, there's currently a transfer station there. And how I see solid waste working its way through Cook County when this transfer station is done, that there's these satellite locations throughout the county where there's some waste that's managed so everybody doesn't have to drive to Grand Marais. So the transfer station that's in Tofty, my goal with that is try to expand the services that are happening out there and improve the overall, I guess I could use the term experience for the customer when they come in there. It's pretty tight in there, it's pretty small. There's a lot of things that have been happening in that transfer station for a long time. Semis, garbage trucks, demolition, things being transferred back and forth. And with this new transfer station, the use of that transfer or that facility out there is going to change. So how I see that working out there is there being multiple dumpsters out there, 4 to 6 dumpsters where people can bring regular household garbage. And then we would stage roll-offs out there that would manage demolition, construction debris, furniture, mattresses, things like that. Currently, electronics aren't being managed out there. There's not a license at that facility for that. Appliances, so if your fridge goes out and you live in Schroeder, you have to drive that to Grand Moraine. And so my idea with that is to kind of clear out everything that's currently there. We did have a meeting, it had to have been about a year ago, with the Solid Waste Committee for Cook County, and talk about expanding the area of that a little bit. It would be on the property of the county garage out there, and really just squaring it off where their roads and driveways are. So I would say that facility would not quite double in size, but maybe increase by 60 or so %, which would allow us the ability to be bringing garbage trucks and roll-off trucks in there and dropping the cans to manage the waste out there. But I'm not going to be able to remember the name of the gentleman who was a commissioner in Hovland before.
Svalson.
No, he was
Frank Moe.
Frank Moe. So Frank had approached us probably 8 years ago now, about the possibility of doing a transfer station out in Hovland. And we had done some research at the time on the property of the county garage as well. For those that are familiar with it, it would be just west of where the old garage building was. There's kind of a wooded area there. I think they also put the recycling trailer out there, of building a small transfer station facility there. And when I say building, leveling the land, Class 5 parking lot, some dumpsters, fence in the area, have a little shack or a little office there that people can come in and pay to dispose of their stuff, have the recycling trailer be part of that as well. And then Grand Portage obviously has their own transfer station currently, which we manage all the waste from. It's going to come from there and come back to Grand Moraine. So this is kind of a spoken hub system that they're talking about for all of Northeast Minnesota. We're kind of talking about for our county just because it's so big. I think in a lot of counties with not as much of a geographical area, for somebody to bring their stuff to a transfer station, you're not driving 60 miles one way to drop stuff off. So in this process, when we're talking about looking at funding, I think now is kind of an ideal time to address all of the things at one time. You know, Tofty and Hovland, they're not big projects like we're talking about with the regular transfer facility. You know, I think redoing the fencing at Tofty probably makes sense. It's falling down and it's broken and bent and things like that. Expanding the area, some dirt work, some Class 5, some taking trees down. Same thing in Hovland. I think you can get done for a reasonable amount of money.
Can you explain your relationship with the county and the Tofty transfer station?
Yes. So in the past, and you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but or you as well, but I believe Nelson's Machine Product, who owned the garbage company out in Tofty before, always just had kind of almost like a handshake agreement to be able to manage their solid waste at this transfer facility out there. And so when we bought Nelson Machine Products a couple of years ago, we kind of got put in to the same kind of a deal. I don't think we have a written agreement with the county to go and pick the garbage up there, but we do still manage that. Now, we have had conversations about, you know, is it a better situation for us to just take over that transfer station and not have the county manage it? Because right now the county employs somebody that sits out there and collects money every time a bag of garbage comes in there. The conversations that we've had with land services and the solid waste was, hey, is it a better situation for us to do, you know, a lease of the facility from the county and us have an employee out there and just manage all of it, kind of like we do in Grand Marais. And I see Hovland being the same situation. So I don't know, does anybody have any questions so far? Yes.
What's the square footage of the transfer station? This is a fenced-in area.
Are you talking about the
One
Tofty
in
transfer?
Tofty, and what you're anticipating perhaps for,
I can't answer that, but I can find that out.
is
Yeah.
it like the size of a baseball field? Is it?
It's
like-
smaller than a baseball field, I would say. I would say it's 100, maybe 150 feet square,
Kind of about an acre.
200
maybe?
feet, yeah, yeah, something like that. And that's pretty tight in Tofty, but I believe that area is going to produce, at least currently, a lot more solid waste than Holden would.
There's a lot of construction going on out there.
A lot of construction, a lot of seasonal people, so,
It gets overwhelmed in the summer on the
Mhm.
weekends,
yeah.
and we're lacking another truck for cardboard,
Mhm,
even though we're making do with having it in Lutzen.
mhm,
I want to see two there
Yeah.
at the transfer station.
mhm. Yeah, so I think, and that's why I say expanding that area a little bit would probably make sense, bring that semi-trailer that you're talking about for cardboard, bring it into the actual facility, and maybe have one there as a backup as well. And then more garbage cans, and then everything that you see that goes into the current pit, we'll call it, would go into roll-off dumpsters. Grand Portage built a really neat thing where their dumpsters are actually below ground. So the top of the dumpster is like waist level. So when you show up to get rid of demolition, instead of throwing it up into a dumpster, you just kind of throw it waist level right into the back of a 30-yard dumpster. So that might be something we could look at there. I don't know what the elevation, if it's possible.
I think one other point to consider is, because there is no agreement, and it really is still a county transfer station there, and Dustin has some pictures. The fence itself is falling apart. It wasn't a great fence to begin with. So at some point, if, there would probably be some capital expense to fixing this stuff out there anyway. So this may be an opportunity to add not a lot of extra money, but some extra money onto this, a bond or whatever to fix this into the future without having to think about it a different way. That's why part of the reason we're bringing it up now for this conversation.
The one question I would have in regards to the person who maintains the transfer station, or is employed by the county and has benefits. So if we do away with the county involvement, then how do you see that person being hired in terms of?
I can't really answer that right now. We would have no problem keeping him. I mean, he's been great to work with since we've been there. I can tell you that North Shore Waste doesn't probably have as great of benefits as Cook County does. But,
Okay, that'd have to be worked out.
mhm,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, even if it stayed under the county management, and you did one like that, to look at this bond, because these are county projects and county facilities, to improve the fencing for both
Okay.
safety and
Yeah.
improve the building space is something you would need to do anyway. So it kind of makes sense if you're looking at solid waste projects to bundle these things together, I think, because it wouldn't have a dramatic effect on what you're paying back, but it would make a big difference in terms of the management of these areas, I think. So I don't think there has to be a conversation here that no one's prepared for about whether that's still county run or whether it's, but it is county owned. So that's seems to be more the operative conversations at this point. And same with recycling. We don't really know what's going to happen with that, but the way the design has been changed allows for different decisions to be made in the future if you chose to, or even because it's a county facility, maybe the county runs their operation there. Maybe there's, they still do their thing, but however, so I don't know the operational logistics, but I think there's some efficiencies to be had here just looking at the facilities themselves, which are county owned.
If county recycling didn't work there, would you still be able to use that space?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
would be worth it. Put it that way.
Would it be worth it to?
Having the expanded size, if recycling.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the size of the building, and you'll see this on here, is reconfigured. The transfer floor itself is bigger, but the overall square footage of the building is the
It
same.
stayed the same. We just
Move some things around.
moved some things around, yeah.
So the cost of the building should be similar?
And how I see being able to manage something besides demolition and solid waste, if it was recycling, would be, you know, you're using a certain tip area for multiple things, you know. Garbage isn't gonna be there all the time. With our original tip floor, we had talked about maybe having garbage done at a certain time and demolition done at a certain time. Well, now we've created 2 different tip areas. One where, you know, maybe garbage could be done at one time and recycling could be done at another time, kind of a thing. So.
So Dustin, I think one of the things, before we really spend time talking about the solid waste fund and the financial management plan, it might be helpful for us to go over to the blueprints, and if you could explain
Sure,
to us
absolutely.
in the public
Yep.
what's going on.
If you guys want to stand on this side, I think this is the lower area, so you'll be able to see it. And this set of plans might be the easiest to start with. So this is a side view of the building. And you can see that the tip floor is up top here, and then down below is where the trucks get loaded. So as we work our way down here, you'll be able to see the different areas. But currently, I'm thinking most of you have probably been to our transfer station before. What would happen in this facility is everything that you see us doing outside currently at our current facility. Customers would drive in, check it in an office, let us know what they have to get rid of, and tell them this product goes here, this product goes there, and they'll drive their way through this door, through the entire facility, and drop their items off, come out the other side empty. There probably will be some stuff that we're gonna manage off-site still, scrap metal being one of them. There just isn't enough room in here, so we probably have something, another area outside to do that. And then, you know, if we get to the point where we can start doing composting as well, I think that would be at a different area as well. So this just shows the first level of it. I think I'll move to the second level because that is really where it shows the tip floor area. So the top here, you'll see these trucks. This is just showing garbage trucks pulled into the facility. So customers would drive through, like I said here. There'll be different areas for electronics or light bulbs, paint, you know, things that can go in the regular garbage. So the customers would drive through here, and then when we're unloading our trucks, for garbage, it would be at the end of the day. You know, we'd come in, we would dump the garbage, we would load that. So this area would be open for customers during the day. Our trucks would back in this way, dump here. If you showed up with a trailer full of demolition, you know, we might ask you to pull up into this parking area here and back in and dump them that way. Or we do have dump trucks that come in full of stuff. McMillan will come in with his big truck to unload stuff from different facilities. The more commercial stuff will be coming through these doors. The semis, they pull in here. They enter this way, one for each one of the pits, and everything just gets pushed right in. Now there's 2 cranes, one on each pit here, that allows to manage the waste as it goes in the truck. You know, you're just pushing it, you can overfill the truck. 2x4s or 2x6s can get sideways in there and get everything stuck up. So a small crane will just reach in there, grab the stuff, like almost like a pulp loader you get in the back of a.
That's what this was over
Yeah.
here.
A pulp loader on the back of a log truck. Same kind of thing, just that would manage the waste. Storing the trucks once they're full. Storage of garbage is an issue with bears and birds, and you know, you have tarps over it, the birds pick through it and pull the stuff out. So storing those trucks when they're full. And then this area right here is used for cleaning the trucks out. So it's a big wash bay, more or less, that you can wash the the trailers out and things like that. And full trucks can also be stored in here. So if we were ever.
Oh, and
we
this,
were-
this is a lift here for
Yeah,
repair,
a lift.
for doing repairs and stuff.
If we were ever in a situation where there was a snowstorm or something happened where the highway would be shut down, not only can we store waste in the facility, but we can also store trucks full inside as well. So we can manage a lot of waste in that facility. I know we've said this over and over in this process. When we started in the beginning, our goal was to try to build a facility that can manage solid waste in Cook County for 50 years or more. As you know, summer is very busy out here, and this facility is going to be busy and full during the summer. November, not so much. You know, we could roller skate probably a little bit in November in this building. But does anybody have any questions on this?
It's really interesting to see the change in the design from the initial plans, but it's really thoughtful and it addresses all the questions that we brought up, so I really appreciate it.
So this change in design does a couple of other things too. Not having that really long building, the snow load on a slanted roof coming down, you know, and where the roads would go and managing all of those pieces, kind of, it does change it. And where did the office end up? Dustin?
The
did-
office is going to be a small satellite building.
No, but isn't there just going to be an office in here too?
Yeah, there'll be a small office. It shows that we're on the
Right.
second level.
So the, that piece there, we had to make sure that, well, there's ADA compliance. They're kind of making sure that works as well. I forget where that is. So they've been talking to everybody, the architects and engineers at the state. They're really aware of all the different statutes and requirements, and, you know, it's been a long conversation on fire suppression, but
And you've worked with the MPCA as well, correct?
right, they've been talking to them. So, you know, once these plans are absolutely, absolutely final, probably early next year, they have to go through a MPCA, a state review that could take, I don't know, what they say, 4 to 8 weeks or something, depending on whatever, but.
And the permitting process that could
Right.
take. Yeah, so there's a review, and then there's also the permitting process. And the permitting process, we're hoping can happen while we're building.
And once the plans are there, there could actually, in parallel to that, be a bidding process. Because we need to, like, as soon as you can this spring, get some shovels in the ground to start the groundwork because of the funding with, some of the funding with IRRB. So kind of playing a lot of different things there, but I think it's all on track. Everybody knows how we can do that. And if for whatever reason we have so much snow we can't get the shovel in the ground until May, I think we have some assurance from the IRRB that they'll say,
They
oh,
understand
okay.
conditions.
Right?
So-
So, yeah, it's pretty cool though, see how it's evolved.
So this is 2 stories here, or 1.5 stories?
It is, it's 2 stories, so the tip floor is 1 story. So it is, yeah, 1.5 stories is probably a really good description of it. The tip floor is here, and then the semis and all the storage area and workshop and everything are all on this lower area. So there's a 17-foot floor change just to be able to get a semi underground, right? And then on top of that, then this building here is 34 feet tall where the tip floor is. Putting the building, it looks like a total of 40, 45, something like that.
And it's built into a hill already, so some of that is taken up that way. But part of what they're working on too is retaining walls, the groundwork that needs to happen, you know, to make that change. It's almost like a highway project, really, when you've got semis and all these different things coming in there, the road construction that you have to do and the turn radiuses and in and outs and, you know, the signage that's involved. It's just interesting. It's a big deal.
So the funding that we receive will take care of the architectural plans
Yes, they told us.
to the
Yeah.
penny,
Yeah,
or about?
Yeah, I think they're giving us a deal.
Right.
Okay.
yeah.
We told them this is what we got, and they said,
Yeah,
okay.
okay.
So, like Rena said when we were sitting over there, our goal is to get a number this year. The plans will continue to be worked on and finalized through the spring, all the way up until construction, you know, outlets here, and this gets lights here, things like that. So we don't need to have the plans completely done to get a number. We're just trying to get them done for far enough down the road that the construction manager is comfortable coming to us with a number.
Other questions for Dustin?
The 45-foot is above county height requirements.
Yes.
Is that because it's in a hillside?
I think in a hillside, and we still do need to, the architects and civil people will address that with the county. I don't believe, it might be on the front of that building that you would measure from. I can't answer that.
Yeah, no, just
without
want to point
talking
out,
to them.
because, hey, heads
Yeah,
up.
on the back here, you'll see a 34
Yeah,
feet.
right, yeah.
Oh, it's the average.
Okay.
Still.
Other questions?
Yeah, that's big. It's a
Yeah.
big building.
No.
Yeah.
Well, the average between 32 and 45 is
Yeah.
still over,
Yeah.
but yeah, 34 here is just not naysaying, I'm just saying, hey, be aware of that.
So one other thing I'd just like to address a little bit, we had initially talked about, you know, this long building that could be covered in solar panels. And looking at that, and not that solar is out of the question in the future, but probably not on the roof. Because those on the roof like that would have required somebody to be up there cleaning them off all the time, right? So, you know, there's area behind this area where they could be more mounted, which you see more and more on these kinds of buildings, which would be easier to maintain. So, but in this part of the building, I don't think it made sense to do that.
Any questions? All right, well, let's get back and we'll talk a little bit about the financial management plan and bonding. Well, we have Ellers on the line, and so we're going to want to take a look at the solid waste fund, the information that we have. Janet, thank you for printing this out, because it's small on a little screen for us.
There we go. Dan, are you still with us?
I am.
All right, we have your document up on the screen and looking at it if you're ready to walk us through it.
Certainly. Well, good morning, everyone. As a reminder, I am Dan Tinter, a municipal finance advisor with Ellers, and I work closely with Bruce Kimmel, who apologized that he couldn't be here this morning. So I suppose I'm his very poor stand-in. For the presentation today, we had the opportunity yesterday to chat with county staff and walk through some of the assumptions that have been built into our model. The thing that I always preface this with is that they are just a series of assumptions at this point. As we know from the presentation that the board just heard, there's still some work to be done and some costs to be finalized, and maybe even some additional projects to be added to the analysis by way of perhaps some fence improvements. But maybe just to not bury the lead, as you can see kind of in the very top box on the analysis here, we are currently projecting a fee by property type, currently for residential at $25, and then really for non-residential or commercial industrial at $50 annually. We had the opportunity to look at what some of the other counties in Minnesota do, and we were also kind of working under the assumption that the county would prefer to have something of a fee that is a little more straightforward and not as administratively burdensome to implement. There certainly are counties that have fees that are based on volume or estimated market value of the property, et cetera, or even some combination thereof, a hybrid fee. But really for this analysis, we really settled on just the flat annual fee by property type. Of course, we can change that if the board is so inclined. That would just take some additional analysis and revising the projections as presented here, but that's always an option. But really just to help you understand kind of where we were coming from when we were setting the fees themselves. Perhaps to jump into the project costs for this particular facility, which drives most of the analysis, you can see down in line 30 in that light blue, we are currently have an estimated project cost of around $5.2 million. That's based on an initial estimate of $5 million, which we've then inflated by 4% to 2025 dollars. From there, what we have done is I've recognized some additional funding sources. So if we go up in that column to line 9, you can see under intergovernmental, after chatting with county staff, we understand that the county has $2 million from the IRRB and $450,000 from DEED. And then we have assumed right above that a solid waste fee of $383,000 and change. That's based on essentially multiplying the number of units in the respective categories by the annual fee to getting to the amount. We've assumed that that fee would be implemented in total in 2025 and use that to size the bond. Now we know, since we're probably in November, that that may not happen on January 1st. So some of these assumptions may have to change, but I think ultimately this still gives you a sense of the order of magnitude and the direction the county would have to go in. We can always fine tune these assumptions when we know when the fee would be implemented, the costs of the project, and ultimately the size of the bonds. From there, we've assumed that whatever is not financed by those fees in the first year and the outside funding sources would then be the bond amount. So about $2.6 million would be the total cost of the bond, and the principal and interest would be around $200,000 a year, assuming that the bond was issued for 20 years at about 4.5%. Again, these are just assumptions and a flat amortization. We could certainly look at different structures and terms once we kind of graduate to that part of the process. A few other assumptions to note for the board. You can see in line 15, we have some costs identified in really a lavender color. We're not sure at this point in time if the county would have or plan on any current expenses or essentially operating costs. So we have programmed just about $100,000 annually adjusted for inflation. Again, if this were not the case, we could always reduce these amounts, put them towards capital projects, or otherwise perhaps even reduce the fee. But again, since these are kind of early days and we weren't exactly sure what form and function the management agreement would take, we did program some of these costs in order to size the fee. Additionally, if you look down in line 31 in the green color, we've also assumed some placeholders for future capital projects. So we planned generally in 2026 and 2027, the 2 years after the $5.2 million cost related to the facility, there wouldn't probably be much in way of capital costs. But then thereafter, we were essentially assuming that there would be some inflated capital costs at $100,000 in 2024 dollars, and then we've just programmed them out accordingly. So all of that kind of adds up to line 26, which is that ending fund balance number, and you can see that generally by the end of 2035, there's about $420,000 in the fund. You may ask yourself, why $420,000 or $419 and change? How did we arrive at that number? These projections are driven, of course, in part by the capital projects that are causing the need for the fee and forming the financial analysis, but we also like to establish fund balance requirements just to make sure that the fund has enough operating capital in it on an annual basis. And so if you look at line 28 in that gray box on the top, you can see that annually we are basically recommending that the county maintain a certain amount of money in the fund. And then when we structure the fee, we try to make sure that the ending fund balance is over that number by some amount. How much that amount is really a decision for the county board, but we really want to make sure that you have enough cash in the fund in order to make your debt service payments, plan or pay for any emergencies or capital projects, any changes in the county board's preference or policy prerogatives, and perhaps most importantly, since these facilities are planning to be funded entirely by the fee, we want to make sure there's enough money in the fund that the county wouldn't necessarily have to ever dip into other funds that are supported by other funding sources, namely property taxes. So in the event there was ever an interruption in the fee, you would still have money available to make your debt service payments on the facility. So ultimately, all of this financial analysis is designed to make sure that you can fund the capital projects, that you can support any planned or expected current expenditures, that you have costs available for future capital projects, for current capital projects like fence replacement, or Brady yesterday mentioned potentially in the future there may be an organics expansion that may have to be planned for, so there's a little money in the fund potentially for those costs. But ultimately, a lot of the fee sizing and the structure will depend on the external funding and ultimately the cost of this project that's being discussed here today. So those are the big moving parts, but I think really the headline to think about is right now, generally based on what we know and given the assumptions that I've described, the annual fee by customer type would be $25 for residential and $50 for commercial industrial, which generally looking at other counties seems to be I would say a reasonable, if not even a modest fee. I don't want to certainly minimize it or be flip about it, but from what we see in other communities, this would not be something that would be kind of out of the norm. So that's, of course, a lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have about the analysis or any of the assumptions that we've made to date.
So any questions by board members or others? Commissioner Mills?
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
You might want to move that microphone.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir.
All right, thank you. When we're talking property types, these are all properties in the county, including vacant land?
Based on the information that was provided by the county, the analysis is based on the number of improved units. So it wouldn't necessarily be vacant land. It would be for those properties that have improvements that we would reasonably expect to produce waste. The other thing to keep in mind in that regard is that we've assumed that all of the units provided in the data provided by the county would pay the fee. Many counties do have an opt-out procedure where you would basically have a form on the website where someone could fill something out, and then the county could make a determination about whether or not they opt to continue paying the fee. But the way this is currently structured is that any improved property would pay the fee.
Thank you.
Question, Rowan?
Dan, then can you confirm then that if there was 4 units on a single property, then that would be the fee times 4? Do we have that correct?
Yes, that would be correct. So when we look at the analysis, we do see that there are a number of parcels that do have multiple improved units on them. And so for those parcels, the fee would just be the number of units multiplied by the fee for their customer type.
Dan, a question that I have is, what counties did you look at when you were looking at the possibility of annual fees?
So we had looked at Clay County, St. Louis County, and Pine County.
Thank you.
And so just perhaps for a little context, Clay County was $45 per residential property. St. Louis County was, excuse me, I thought I had it up, but I do not. Give me just a minute. Must have closed it by mistake. I can't get it open here. It was $85 for the first residential senior recreational parcel, and then $25 for all second residential or seasonal parcels. And then they had a hybrid fee where their commercial properties were based on estimated market values that were between $80 and they estimated up to $800 for commercial and industrial parcels. And then Pine County was on the lower end. For all improved taxable property, they had a fee of $10, which they most recently increased in 2020.
Thank you. Other questions that commissioners have? Commissioner Johnson.
I don't know that it's for, I'm thinking, talking about that commercial structure, and I'm thinking, I get $50 a year isn't a lot, but, so, I don't know if it's worth it, but I'm just thinking that the very small businesses compared to the large Bluefin Bays or Ski Hill businesses. I'm just wondering about fairness there. It's what popped into my head as being a former small business owner.
And Dan, the units like at Bluefin Bay, they're each counted, correct? your
Correct.
knowledge?
Okay.
Yep, so if you had a small business that, let's say, was one improved unit on one parcel, they would pay $50. If you had a larger resort that, let's say, had 10 units on a parcel, then they would just pay the multiple that Ronan described.
That's helpful, thank you.
So certainly larger operations with more improved units on their parcel that are presumably generating more waste would pay a higher fee.
And we talked a little bit about the value of a very kind of simple, clean approach to it to minimize the administrative overhead of implementing a process like this. Tim Nelson, Director of Land Services, weighed in and mentioned a desire to have it that way as well.
He's seen it the other way too, when they were at Clearwater.
Right.
They tried to design it for, different levels of commercial and different levels of home, et cetera. But they weren't building a structure like this either. I think that's also the reason for Pine's low $10 is they're not building a new structure like capital, this kind of capital, right, Dan?
That's my understanding as well. We have not reached out to them specifically to know exactly what their fee funds, but I think to your point, one of the dangers sometimes in comparing is we don't exactly know where folks are at in their own operations, what services they provide, what kind of deferred maintenance or future projects they're contemplating. So it could very well be, and we see this a lot, where someone has a lower fee and then a few years later it's suddenly higher because they've had or are then having the conversation you're having now about investing in facilities or opting into new programs.
Commissioner Mills.
So just to clarify too, it says, see page 2, there is no page 2 that I'm seeing. So I don't know if there is anything on page 2, but it sounds like the fees are gonna, aside from our other revenues with the grants we've received from DEED and IRRR, the fees are gonna cover our payments here.
Yes, currently at this point in time, the way the fee is currently structured, unless the board were to modify it, is designed to cover the debt service, designed to cover a certain amount of current expenses for the facility, and designed to cover some amount of future capital costs related to the facility, be that deferred maintenance or potentially an expansion at some point in time in the future.
And
So we really were trying to make sure that the fee did not require the use of any general property taxes, which is why if you look at line 7, you see all zeros right across the board there.
Right. And I think we should point out too, for our knowledge and the public's, that there are these annual fees based on the property. There still is a fee for dropping off garbage, and or having garbage collected and all that. So it's not that we're having these fees and then everyone it's covered. It's this is for the facility, paying for the facility and keeping our waste system operating in a sustainable fashion. And then there's still the business fees too. Thank you.
Other questions?
If
Brady?
we were not able to get this established, the fee for 2025, then could we restructure the bonds to start the payments a year later, even if we issued bonds this year?
Yes, so you would have the option to structure the first few years of the bonds to have some type of step up or step into the principal payments. You would still be obligated to pay a certain amount of interest, but we could reduce the amounts by having lower principal perhaps in 26 and 27, and then perhaps up to kind of a full maturity payment in 2028. But you certainly have a number of options in terms of structuring the bond so that the ongoing revenues will meet those expenditures, at least in the beginning when you are ramping up the fee.
Well, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about the information that we've been given in addition to the new plan and how you've walked us through that is this addresses a huge issue that we have in the Arrowhead, and we know that this is critical to get done. And I'm really pleased with what I'm seeing on the financial management plan. Looking at those fees, I anticipated significantly higher fees. So from my viewpoint, I think this is really a solid way, pun intended, to approach this. Anything else? Dustin and Rena, any concluding comments you'd like to make?
Not really. I do think it's important that we all know that those final numbers aren't there yet. You know, it's just all hypothetical, and our plan is to come back and have that.
Great. Well, we look forward to seeing you in the near future. We want to thank you, Dan, and Rena, and Dustin for all your work on this very important initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
You bet. I think what we'll do is take a very short break so we can get the blueprints here wrapped up, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes. Thank you. Let us know when you're ready.
It's going. I just gotta get it.
Are you doing the sign drafts? Signage drafts next?
Sign and name. All right, well, welcome back to our Committee of the Whole work session. We're on and getting ready to approach items number 3 and 4, a couple of policies, signing and naming policies. And this information that is being shared today is based on something that came out of our strategic plan. Initiative 1, goal number 3, is a goal that asks us to regularly review and update our policies or establish new ones where there are gaps. And I've been reviewing policies from many counties throughout the state of Minnesota and have found that we have a very small number of policies compared to some other counties. Some have actually policy manuals that are 300 or 400 pages in length. And I am not advocating that we jump into that or dive into that. We have plenty of to do. But I do think it's important that we look, based on our strategic plan, at our policies, that we regularly review them. Just today, we've talked about a burial policy, which I didn't know about. And we talked a little bit about remote work, and there's a policy around that. And there are a number of other policies that we have, but some that are missing. And so as I started to think about the capital improvement plan that we have, thinking about deferred maintenance, thinking about potential addition or remodeling of facilities, I thought we might want to start to look at a signage policy. So signage in dual language is pretty common here in Cook County. I think all of us have been up to ISD 166 and seen signs that are both in English and in Anishinaabe, and they provide numerous benefits for our community. They enhance inclusivity and engagement for all the members of the community. And the photo I grabbed here was just from the other day. You walk up to ISD 166 and the first thing you see is welcome, Boozoo. And so that's an example of some welcoming language that can be included. It also fosters inclusivity and equity, demonstrating respect and recognition for our history and diversity, and encourages a sense of belonging among English speakers, Anishinaabe speakers, or bilingual speakers. It acknowledges their presence and their importance. Also really critical is that through cultural preservation, we're supporting the visibility and use of Indigenous language, helping to preserve and promote cultural heritage, and a bigger piece, at least something that I always think about, is educating the broader public about linguistics and the cultural diversity of our area over hundreds and thousands of years. So this is going to help make our buildings and facilities more welcoming to all visitors and build stronger connections between different groups within our community. It fosters community pride, celebrating our cultural and linguistic makeup, the history of our community, and sends a really positive message to strengthen relationships within our community, particularly with relationships with Grand Portage. And this particular sign is just an example outside the nurse's office at ISD 166, where the kids were actually involved in coming up with the name, the nurse's office, and then that is approved by instructors that are on staff. And I did have an opportunity to speak with Maria Burnett, the education director at Grand Portage, and she felt it would be very viable to, if the county engages in some type of signage policy where we're looking at bilingual signage, that kids could be involved, and that Eric Reddix and also Mr. Zimmerman, who's the language teacher at ISD 166, could be involved. This is a picture of the superintendent's office. They have a sign up at the top, which says Superintendent's Office, and then down below the numbered room, it shows the name in Anishinaabe, and again, it makes public spaces more inclusive and culturally vibrant. The nice part of developing a policy is that it doesn't mean that we have to do this all at once or that's going to cost a lot of money. It's something that we can do over time as signs are replaced just because of the changing nature of a facility, when space is added, or if there is remodeling. And recently there was some remodeling done at the high school media center, and so they added in Anishinaabe a little sign next to what was already there painted on the wall. Naming policies also need to be done right now because of the fact that we're working with our facilities. And so we are in the process of potentially naming a building or an addition, a room, different grounds based on their function, physical features, or water bodies, but things that are practical in nature, but that also might have cultural or community significance. When I was thinking about this, one of the areas I thought about is the harbor down in Grand Marais, the clarity and the functionality of some of the names that are there, which provide easy navigation for our tourists that come to our community. But you think of Harbor Park, the Grand Marais Recreation Area, Grand Marais Municipal Campground and Marina. They tell you exactly what goes on there and where they're located. Some places have more of a geographic or a cultural connection. When I drive to town every day, I go past the Gunflint View, and just its name gives you a sense of its location and cultural identity. And what a view that is. Oftentimes, buildings in the past have been named after individuals, and that can create problems. Naming a building after a person can lose relevance over time or invite controversy if something is discovered about that person that they didn't know when they named the facility. How do you manage criteria for naming a building after people when you get requests all the time from people in the community? And I think of back to an experience I had in a school where I taught. I used to teach at Ramsey Middle School in Minneapolis, and when I taught there, Alexander Ramsey was the person that hung the 38 Dakota members down in Mankato. And I remember the discussion of why did we ever name a building after this person, and that building went through a lengthy process of being renamed after Justice Alan Page, who was our first black Supreme Court justice in Minnesota. But it's an extremely time-consuming effort, and you can just avoid a lot when you don't name after people. It also enhances community pride when we name things after our local natural features. I think of Maple Hill Cemetery, the Maple Hill Church, the Maple Hill Fire Department, but it really fosters pride in our community and the environment and the character. And as I went to the play on Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I looked at the Arrowhead Center for the Arts and thought about that cultural significance. The Arrowhead, thought about everybody recognizes what part of our state that is, and it really signifies just the natural beauty and the cultural significance that we have here. Universality and inclusivity are part of functional names. Commissioner White often talks about the hub and what kinds of activities go on there, and the hub just represents really what that is to our community. It's a center with spokes that go out to reach many. We have the Grand Marais Public Library. It tells us the location and the function that goes on there, and it avoids any kind of controversies that might arise naming, let's say, a library after a person. It can encourage our connection with nature, and that is true so often here in Cook County. A facility or grounds can be named after lakes, rivers, forests, and just helps us to kind of connect and engage with the environment. Think of Superior National Golf Course. So this naming approach communicates purpose and connection, but reinforces a shared sense of place and community identity. And what I'd like you as commissioners to think about is how establishing the policies laid out before you might help us as we move forward to name buildings, spaces, as we are in the process of reconfiguring, remodeling, and working on all these facilities. So something to think about. Any questions? Commissioner White.
We're focusing on the Anishinaabe language, and it should, what about the Swedes and the Finns and the Norwegians that established, I mean, they came here, they were fishing, they came to Cook County. In the school district, 27% at one time of the population was from Grand Portage. And those students it was an effort to immerse. They're in the school, and it was a respect, and it was only right to do that. But in this county, and I'm not against doing the Ojibwe language, but then explain why the Swedish language, and I can give you an answer in that the Anishinaabe language is still a living language that is practiced and promoted and culturally significant, more significant than to the original. I'm not original, so if any people that are descendants of the fishermen and the loggers, I don't know how many people still speak in their ancestors or their descendants. Do their grandparents speak Swedish or Norwegian or anything like that? I don't know, but that's a consideration as to why, and that needs to be explained if that becomes a policy.
Yeah, and I think you did a great job of explaining it. It's about that we don't see that there are individuals speaking those languages. I've tried to check a little bit with linguistics, and I'm not aware of people in Cook County that are speaking those languages still. I think the big part of it is that we are also encouraging our Anishinaabe language to be taught, that it's a course here in our school, that it's being taught in Grand Portage, at Oshkie, and but I appreciate you bringing up that question.
Well, it's a question that will be asked.
Yes, absolutely. Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's about 11 in terms of thinking about it in the new year. I think it needs to be kind of talked about and absorbed, but I don't see any emergency kind of thing, like you say. You're going to name a building. This is the highway department. This is the courthouse. This is the community center. We already have names. So, just in the future.
Yeah.
But I don't see any big rush.
And I guess I would say I don't see a big rush. I would like to have a policy in place before we start this, and I have policies that we share, for example, with BKV. So as they're engaging with our community, maybe there are community focus groups, we can talk about names, talk about signage. But I will say that I regularly get requests to name facilities after people. And I shared with Interim Administrator Watkins one that I got this weekend. I get about one a week from somebody who is deceased in the community and wants either a name or a facility named after them. And so I feel that, because that does occur, I would like to see a policy in place relatively soon.
And until the buildings are built, like Kenny said, the buildings are identified by their function at this moment in time.
Right,
They have
and that is
served us very
perfectly
well.
appropriate, absolutely.
And so,
There is nothing that would prohibit us from continuing to do that. Commissioner Johnson.
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Storley. This and the next policy came out of the blue for me. I know there have been talk about people asking certain things get named after people, and that got shut down pretty easily. I understand we need signage at each of our buildings saying what it is. I think that's pretty standard practice. I'm wondering who decided which policies needed to be reviewed. We were part of the strategic planning committee and talking about going over policies. To me, it's more appropriate, and I would agree, this should be move into next year. Don't rush this. This is not something that needs to happen before the end of the year, before we set our levy. That's kind of priority right now, where we should be investing our time and our efforts of what we need to get done. But I would suggest that we have a committee.
I think you are absolutely right.
I'm seeing this and I'm like, well, who worked on this? I didn't even know it was available. I might have offered some opinions, but then I see a written policy. That is concerning to me, that we aren't having a discussion about where is the priority of what we want to see happen. And this is my suggestion for the next board is at the big January meeting, when you're setting your schedules and your mission, talk about what are your strategic plan? What is the number one thing we want to accomplish? And then how, at the end of the year, say, how did we do? I feel that's been missing, especially this year, of having us all know what's happening and what's going on. So
you really read my mind, because I really think that at our organizational meeting next year, we need to get a couple of us together and form a committee to look at policies. What are some things that we need? That's the role of commissioners, and that's something we haven't in the last year really worked on. I looked at our policies and compared to what is being done in other counties, and there's website policies, land and mineral guide policies, appointment policies, road access policies, drone policies, record retention, breastfeeding, misconduct policies. There's all kinds of things that we don't have, and so I think it would really be helpful to have a group get together to take a look at these things and determine what are some of the priorities that we have. So I think that's an excellent suggestion.
And number 11 on the list, we have a budget that we have to figure out, and this is a committee of the whole, where we should have the opportunity to really dig into where are we going. Brady left. He sent the thing, we're down to 8.5. Well, that's still 3.5 from 5. You know, we're a long ways to go, and how many more meetings do we have before we have to, you know, say, here we go. And we're running out of time. We're just running out of time.
Well, we have 3 meetings. The next 2 are very close together. And so we have a lot of work to do. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, we will move on to item 5, human resources.
Just curious, would you want to have Tessa join us and
Yes,
do that
we have the
item
phone right here.
first? Just, she's been waiting.
Sure.
Okay. Do you have her number? Otherwise, I'll give it to you. Okay. The 952? Okay.
This is Tessa.
Hey Tessa, this is Rowan Watkins with Cook County. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Say I got you on our speakerphone here in the Committee of the Whole meeting, and the board's here, and we're at the point in our meeting where you're on the agenda. Are we ready to do a presentation?
Yep, I just need 1 minute because I'm driving. I just need to pull over. So if you just give me 1 minute, because I didn't know when the meeting was going to be, so I'm trying to get to my next meeting. So just give me 1 minute and I will pull over, and then I can present.
All right, sounds good. Maybe we can have Allison give some background information.
Okay.
Perfect.
Me or Rowan to do. I guess both of us. I mean, I guess I can start too, unless you would like to.
Are you going to do the HR generalist or the pay table structure first?
I think with Tessa, just for her time's sake, I was thinking just flop them and do the pay table first. Does that work?
Yeah,
Do you want me to start? Okay. So I believe Rowan has reached out to commissioners to give kind of a little synopsis of what we're going to discuss today. But I work with Tessa with DDA to do our job description review process. So we set out a time frame of a two-year window to go through and review all of our job descriptions, including the classification of those job descriptions, or those positions, excuse me. And so during this process, just within the last couple of months, as we're going into the reviews of some of the higher level positions, including department heads and the county administrator position, the information coming back for the review of the classifications for those positions is actually looking at potentially increasing the grades based on the Keystone matrix that we are utilizing for those job descriptions. Again, this is the matrix that we've been using for all of the jobs. And there are grades 100 to a 270 on that Keystone matrix. However, our current pay table does not represent a 270. It does not have the 270 on there, which is now coming into play as kind of being a barrier and holding up our processes for continuing to review some of our job descriptions. So in talking with Rowan, just talking about next steps to really address this, I suppose you could call like a missing grade on our table, so we can continue on with our job description review process. There's quite a few impacts potentially of looking at adding this grade, so it matches really the Keystone matrix, goes with the process that we are instilling for our internal equity. Yeah, so anything else
just
to
add
add?
from a timeline perspective, I think, as Allison mentioned, where we're at internally with the job description reviews, where we're at with moving forward with posting to hire a county administrator, and then just this information coming from DDA as recommendations, sort of a maintenance of our pay table, and with all the things that Tessa will talk about, including the governor's salary cap removal and other things that have changed the job market, that it felt appropriate for the board to hear this information from DDA as soon as possible. And so we reached out to Tessa to provide this information to you all. And yeah, that's kind of as best I can frame it. Tessa, are you in a spot?
Yep, I'm parked. Yep, I'm parked and ready to go.
Okay.
All right.
Jana's going to bring your PowerPoint up on the screen too.
Okay, perfect. And I'll just go through the first slide that says agenda. I'm just going to explain a little bit about who I am, because I haven't met all of you. And I just kind of want to explain that, and then we'll go through kind of like the grid solutions. So what can you do and kind of the impact of those solutions, and then like decisions that the board could make, and then answer any questions at any time. So with that, I can just keep going and let me know when you guys are up and running. And I just, like, some of this is just more DDA. So they've been around. David was a civil engineer, started about 20 years ago. Our HR started about 8 years ago doing class and comp, executive recruitment, and org studies. So that's kind of who we are. As on the slide that says ongoing maintenance, you basically, what we did is when we did the original market analysis, it was a lot and it was a big adjustment, and the board said, we really want to just kind of maintain this and have minimal budget disruption, look at it more frequently. So part of that is annual review of wages compared to the benchmark entities. So we look at every single job, look at your classifications and your job descriptions, working with the board to maintain pay philosophy. So that's kind of the idea of where do we want to be within the market, compensation and classification systems, and then discuss trends with the board for planning. on the slide that says factors that influence the market, some of what Rowan talked about is, people always ask, like, what are you seeing in the market? So the retail industry, is paying about $20 an hour entry level. So that has really pushed that. And we've worked with a lot of entities, kind of 23 and 24, to make sure your minimum rates for the people are at that level. Looking at other trends, there's an increase in turnover rates in the public sector. Other entities are also doing compensation studies. Labor shortage, so when you have an opening, you're not getting the number of candidates you once were, especially if it's a licensed position or needs specific certification. And then legislation had, up until this year, saying if the governor makes X amount of money, no public employee could make more than that without an exemption. So most cities and county use that as a rule of setting their wages, and we've seen that go away in legislation. And because of that, a lot of counties and cities are starting to pay above what they were normally paying because they can. So they're kind of catching up where they may have been kind of ceilinged or stalled with their pay grid. Now they're kind of going up to meet the needs of that, and it's affecting leadership. On the market analysis slide, and if I'm not on the same slide, let me know to stop or slow down. I'm assuming you guys are moving. Perfect, okay. Basically what I wanted to just show is it has a year on the left, so 23, 24, and then kind of with the changes, where you kind of came into the market average and maximum. So again, when I look at the market, I'm looking at the min and the max, because if your min is low, you're having a hard time getting people in. If your max is low, you're having a hard time keeping them. So in 2023, we were about 3% under and 5% under that market average. 2024, we were about 7% under that, but with the classification changes that we've been going through with all of the job descriptions review that you guys have seen, we've got it back into a good place to be with the market. So we knew when we first started, we kind of created maybe made some grid changes, but we didn't touch the classifications, and we knew that was going to be an issue with compression. You had a whole bunch of employees at 170. So now we're kind of going in, and I'm going to say we're surgically fixing the system. So we've been doing that, and you can see that all that work has fixed it to be within where the board wants to be. And the next slide is really the market analysis. So we do that ongoing maintenance to make sure you have updated job descriptions, make sure that the grid, the compensation, the wages are doing what it's designed to do, maintaining the board's philosophy, working every year to do some changes so you have minimal budget disruption, but maintain your market competitiveness so you can keep, retain talented employees, and when there's an opening, get talented employees. And the next slide just shows your 2025 pay table. I think, did we put the 2024 in there too?
That was
or
in
is
the
that
memo.
just in the memo?
That was
maybe?
just in the memo.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry. So basically what that does is I just wanted to show in here, you know, these grades start at 100, you go up to 270. You basically, when you start, you kind of go 7%, and then there's an 8 in there, 6, 6, 7, and then at the top, it kind of stops at that 4% between. And textbook would say you should have 7 to 10% between grades. You know, the market isn't beautiful, and it doesn't always work like it should. So it's not anormal to have some discrepancies between the percent between grades. But what's happening at the top is you only have 4% and 4%, which means you're kind of creating a compression there, and there isn't much difference there. In line with that, your department heads are kind of all, you know, within a couple of grades, so there creates some compression there as well. Any questions so far?
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, and thank you, Tessa. It's been a while. Happy to hear your voice again.
Thanks.
Is there a way we can get, I'm sure there's a way, could we please get the number of employees in each grade at some point, and that's not on you necessarily, Tessa. I'm thinking Allison can do that for us, but that would just help,
Sure.
I think, us understand
Oh.
the table a lot better and the impacts.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I can work with Allison to do that easily, yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the ones that
Um,
Tessa is identifying at the top, kind of the focus is anywhere between the 240, 250, the 260 right now, are where most of our department heads fall, usually like right in that 250. We have a couple that are less than that. Most of them start at the 210. Well, we have one at a 210. The recorder's at a 210. I'm at a 220. Majority of them are at 240. Molly's at 250. County administrator's at 260. So most of them are falling right in, like where Tessa said there's a compression.
But we can definitely give you that information, but yep, that's kind of where those numbers are gonna fall.
That helps a lot already,
Um,
but yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So the next slide kind of has decision points. So the question really is today, do we use a grade 270? So if you start on the left-hand side of that matrix, it says currently the pay grid is used to grade 260 where the county administrator is classified. So the question there is the grid, has always had a 270. When I go down there, I'm not sure if this was like created when Keystone first did the study or it came in later, but ever since I've seen it, it's always had a 270. You just didn't use it. And it's not atypical not to use some grades, so that sometimes happens. But with it, even without it, it's typical to add at the top to reduce wage compression. So I always say when you recalibrate your pay grid, you can either go horizontally where you add to the steps and maybe take one step off, add one step, or you go vertically where you shift everyone, like basically grades, you move them so that their percent of change is equal. So it's very typical to even add on if it wasn't created. You know, there is, like Rowan said, I would say the timing of this couldn't be more perfect because you're searching for a county administrator. We're going through the process and seeing some compression and some jobs just starting to fall below where we would like to see them. So the question really is perfect timing, but really is to maintain that competitiveness. And I would say other factors that you can't control that are just attributing to this is that removal of the salary cap. You know, the spread does vary to grade. So some are 7s, some are 6s, some are 4s. And we are seeing increased leadership pay throughout the counties because of that removal of the salary cap. And then the last one would be just reviewing leadership jobs and descriptions, making sure they're classified where they should be. And that's part of when I looked at this, you know, we were talking and I said, there just seems to be compression. One way of addressing it would be to use that grade that was built in but not used.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Storley. So we don't really have anybody above the administrator that would qualify for a 270. Or are we looking at somebody way down the road that would qualify for a 270? Because right now, we would be hiring an administrator around 260.
Well, based on the job descriptions that that Tessa and I have completed for some of the department heads, some of the leadership roles, including the county administrator, after doing the job description, just reviewing the classification, based on the Keystone Matrix and the points, the county administrator position is actually ranked in a 270 based on points. But we can't put that position there because we don't have a 270. And then subsequently, some of the other department head positions, descriptions that I've been holding on to recently, those are coming back scoring higher. So what's happening is now some of those positions that are like a 250, a 260, I'm like, well, they can't be there because the county administrator is at a 260. Well, that one's supposed to be at a 270. So that's really what spurred this conversation is all of a sudden now we have a cap that isn't supposed to be there. And so we're at kind of this holding position. So technically the county administrator position, based on the scoring matrix that we said we would use, should be at a 270. So this is why we're having this discussion of like, where are we going?
Well, can we use it as a placeholder then? Is that the end result? Use it as a placeholder to negotiate for a position?
The 270? Yeah, well, I mean, for recruiting for a county administrator, that is the discussion that we're going to have with Patrick Melvin and DDA for that recruiting is, what is the salary range? And so if the Keystone Matrix is saying, based on points, and the scale that you're using, it should be at a 270, then that's where it probably should be the placeholder for determining the salary. And then accordingly, then all of the other department level leadership positions that are scoring higher than where they're at, then could subsequently move up as well.
And in addition, like one of the commissioners said, we could just use it as a placeholder. You haven't been using it. But the issue is you can't place somebody higher than the county administrator because of pay equity comp worth points. That's your highest comp worth job at the county. So if you just said, well, I want to pay so-and-so more, so we're going to move them, that would cause an issue with pay equity. So pay equity only looks at internal equity based on those comp worth points. It doesn't look at the market, so it doesn't care where you are to the market, but internally it would raise a red flag and say, why are you paying this position above the county administrator? So what we're saying, and this kind of goes into that slide of impact of using or not using 270, you need to make sure that you're using pay equity so that you pass. If you don't, you could lose some CGA money. But you can't just arbitrarily put a position in there. And I'm just saying that if you use 270 like it was intended, it allows the county administrator to go there and some flexibility then when I look at those classifications, because they're compressed, I can't move them above. It'll allow that to and it'll maintain market competitiveness while also maintaining internal equity or pay equity.
Commissioner Mills.
And I think I have a little context for why we're maybe in this predicament a little bit, is because when we did our comp study, James basically put his pay aside for the rest of the organization. I think at that time it was recognized he should be a 270, but he said, and I think this is a verbatim quote, I'm paid well enough, is what he felt. So I applaud his selflessness, but also it kind of puts us in a little bind here. So I think as we go forward, it's real important that we have that position at the grade it's supposed to be, lest we get into pay equity trouble and or we have a hard time recruiting. One of the other things that we as a board used before we hired James was just upping the steps, kind of like you were saying, Tessa, but that only gets you so far, and then again, if there's a different position that James is supervising, then you get the trouble there. So
yeah. No, that's a great memory, because I actually was looking through some of our notes and I just found that last night. So good memory, Commissioner Mills. But basically, if you don't use 270, you have issues with market competitiveness. You could hurt your recruitment for your county administrator position, because that position is going to be really hard to recruit, and you want to make sure you're paying them the right way. But it also can hurt recruitment and retention for your leadership positions. You could not use 270, so say we're going to stay at the 260, but we're going to increase the spread between. That does fix some of your problems. It'll pass pay equity, it'll assist with your recruitment for the county administrator, it'll help with leadership, but it won't reduce that compression, because we still will have people just sitting where they're sitting, and there'll be a little bit of compression. Using 270, I would say, addresses everything. It passes pay equity. I'm sorry, it should be market competitiveness on the first one. passes pay equity, assists with recruitment for county administrator, and assists for recruitment and retention for your leadership positions. So really on the next slide is your board decision is do you use that 270? And I would say if the board is at a no, we're kind of done and we just have to continue doing what we're doing. If it's a yes, the next question would be, is that 4% between the grades, you know, sufficient, or making it more like the rest of the grades at 7%?
We can't make any decisions today, it's just a
Right.
discussion.
This is our discussion.
Right.
But if you don't like something I offered and you have another solution, you can let me know and I can run it. Or Commissioner Mills, we can get the numbers of employees where they are on those grades. If there's more information you need, that's kind of on this too, so we can pull it or show it in another way that's helpful.
Levy impacts would be helpful.
Right, yeah.
The dollars
Yeah.
and cents, but yeah, those numbers would be really helpful. And when I say levy impacts, I mean the whole range, both if we went to a 270 and if we did the spread up to that 7%. Or is spread right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we could actually run those numbers like potentially where we would see positions fall in and the impact. And movement isn't going to be, you know, same grade or new grade, same step. It's usually there's a % increase. So we can definitely, so you would know exactly the dollar impact. That's a great point.
Yeah, and so I guess having that 7% would be helpful, but then also would be, I think, important for us to look at what it would be if we kept it at the 4% spread.
Sure.
Just so we can get
Those
an
are
idea of-
super easy to run and we can have for you when you are ready to make a decision.
Commissioner White.
Commissioner White here. And then what does it mean for going forward year after year with the cost of living? This is like already with the last time around, it increased the labor cost by more than to $1 million a year. And that's only going to get bigger it just keeps going forward or increasing. So what would it be like at Tess with the 4% and 7% comparisons, and then what does it look like going forward, like 2 or 3 years, something like that? How
Sure.
does that impact
Yep.
the overall budget?
Yep,
labor.
we can do some scenarios like if you left it at where it is, or you moved it to, I'm going to say option A, 7% between, option B, just leaving the 4%. And I can run those numbers very quickly and get that to you so you have measurements to make your decisions.
That would be great, thank you.
Commissioner
Yeah,
Sterling.
Thank you. So Allison has been really working very hard on getting things up to speed with all the employees. I would say we have about 125, 130 employees. So if we say we're going to have 270 and then it'll be about a 4% spread, does that mean you have to go back? Or is this for the future, for the spread? Do you have to go back and relook at everything? Or is this for like 25, 26?
Yeah, I would say it's probably for 25, 26, and again, it's only going to impact those, like, if we just made a 270, it would only impact the county administrator, and we don't even know what you'll bring that person in at, so we don't know what that cost is. The only other impact it will have on the county is if anyone moves to that 260 that isn't there right now, because they would have different earning potential. The rest of the grid has been recalibrated and is doing what it's supposed to do.
Okay, thank you.
So there could potentially be impacts for 2024 because
Yeah,
there are
yep,
jobs
sorry.
that potentially, no, that's okay, Tessa. There are potentially still a few department head positions, plus the county administrator position, again, because we're hiring, that still could see that impact in 2024 because right now I'm holding on to them until we determine what's going on, so they may see movement. So again, could be impact starting with 2024, because I'd like to wrap up that 2-year process by the end of the year, if not right into the beginning of the year. And then for sure going 2025 forward.
The job descriptions, just to kind of maybe add a little extra context or put a finer point on it, the job descriptions that have already been done that Commissioner Storley referenced, those are done the way the Keystone and around the parameters that the board has set for our targets and job analysis. So that's been done the way that the tools that we have and that the direction of the board has wanted us to do, and though they fell in scores that they've been moved to.
Right.
But where we're running into a potential issue is with those upper level director positions where either we're gonna need to keep them artificially low compared to how we've been operating with the other ones, or do some of the adjustments that Tessa and DDA are recommending. And so to me, that's why I bring it up and why I share it from a context perspective, I guess, is there's a little bit of a fairness or an equity piece in there as well as a kind of an upward pressure in the organization that we've already started to go down that road, where we've taken people that were at 170s or 160s and moved them up a couple steps, following the process, following the tools that we have put in place, maybe not knowing that we've put an artificial ceiling for the folks that are already at the top. And it's just something that, like I said at the beginning, we wanted to bring to the board's attention as soon as possible and figure out how the board wants to address it.
Commissioner Johnson. Yes, thank you. This is Commissioner Johnson, Tessa. I'm wondering, how many counties do you work with that work with this Keystone Matrix scale?
That's a really good question. So I am personally trained in about 20 different systems, and of that we have like the other biggest one that uses Keystone would be the city of Rochester, so they use it. And then I think I'd have to verify, but I think there's 2 other county clients that use it, but I would have to verify that. But that's a good question. All the classification systems, like if you use Keystone, or we have 2 of our own, you might have heard of SAFE, or like the Hayes system or State Match system, they're all designed pretty similarly to look at the job description and create comp worth or internal equity. So it's based on what the job does for the organization, not what the person's doing. So if I come in like with a doctorate, it doesn't matter because that's not required. But that's a good question, but they're all supposed to look similar. And then when we look at the market, when we see deviations, that's when I kind of say, well, maybe this classification isn't falling with the market because X, Y, or Z, and that's kind of why we red flag it. But I can get you exact numbers. I don't have that offhand.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing those other counties and wondering.
Sure.
Do they have a 270? And I'm just kind of surprised that this is the first time we heard this discussion. I mean, we did our market analysis, we did all that other discussion, and this didn't come up that I remember. And I remember, but I do remember when we did the Keystone study, the angst that caused amongst our employees and our organization, and there was a lot of hesitation about it working, and now I'm thinking, maybe we need to start all over. No, not me, thank you.
No, I don't think so. I don't know that. So to answer your question in part, the Keystone system may be used by other counties. I'd have to verify which ones, but I know it is used by like Rochester. But their pay grid is going to be different than yours. So I'm just going to give an example. So you have 100 to 270, so like 17 grades. Some entities some will have 25 grades. I've worked with clients that have 50 grades. So the classification system is separate. That tells me the comp worth. The grid or the grades are really based on updated job descriptions, internal equity, so that classification, but then also market competitiveness of how the county wants to pay. So I don't know that you would get your answered through that, because even if someone uses Keystone, they're going to have a different pay grade based on their pay philosophy. They may have more grades or not. Does that answer your question?
Well, it makes me think that maybe we need to research our philosophies and what we're using, because
Oh, sure.
in the talking
Sure.
with other commissioners from other counties and realizing can't understand what they're talking about, because they have a totally different structure and it seems to be working and it doesn't seem so complicated as ours, makes me think, I wonder if we have the best system. So.
Sure. Yeah. And again, I would say, so I work with, probably 20 different systems. I think the Keystone system, it does a good job of looking at the job descriptions. There definitely are some flaws of it. But I really always tell, because I always get that question too, should we use this system or this system? And really it's, I would say culture, like how do you explain it in some of the training to the employees so that they understand that what you're looking at. But again, I think classification is only 1/3 of the puzzle. The other two pieces is internal equity and then market competitiveness. And any system can run really well if it's used the way it was intended, and any system can run really bad if it's flawed and not running the way it was intended. But we definitely can have that discussion, like, is this the correct system for the county? I always say, if it's not completely broke, let's keep going and focus on other areas. But if that's something that you guys really want to look at, totally we can have those conversations.
I'm just really disappointed this is coming up at the last minute, that we didn't have any heads up. We've been doing this whole job description reviews and it isn't until we get to a hiring position. Although we did talk about it when how many, was it 170s or 180s we had? Which was a huge number. Should have been a warning sign, but I guess we should have, it would have been nice to have that information prior to them go to hire.
And I think like Commissioner Mills mentioned, we did talk about it because we talked about looking at James's position, specifically the county administrator, and his was like, nope, I just want to focus on the rest of the organization. So we kind of mentioned it and put it in a parking lot, but we probably should have come back sooner versus now. It's just that the timing also is you have a county administrator. If James was still here today and you weren't hiring, I would still be here talking about it because it came up when I'm looking at the leadership positions in the county. So we would be here regardless if James was here or not here. But to your point, we did slightly look at it before, but it probably wasn't enough attention and we should have brought it out of the parking lot sooner.
Commissioner White.
I have a question for the board members that were here before. What other, besides Keystone, what other assessment programs did you look at? And why did you settle on Keystone?
We didn't look at any others. We talked about looking at them with Tessa, and basically, I think she described it very well, that every system is a system. And so you just have to be trained in that system and familiar with that system in order to use the system. And so switching systems could have some benefits, but the onboarding of it and getting our staff, or I guess now they're the ones that largely do it, evaluate is an additional barrier and a hurdle. So if we were to switch, and so also the grass is always greener, but if we were to switch systems, we would have to go through all of our job descriptions again. And,
Well, I was just wondering how this was decided. So what does DDA, what is the expense to have Tessa do this for us?
it's roughly
It's $10,550 a year for all of the services that they provide with our job description review, market analysis, all of that.
Yeah, and I would say that we technically are going, like, your system was flawed because there were so many at 170s, and that's why, like, we're going through this process where we're looking at each job, and you've seen jobs come and I say, hey, I think they were undervalued here, here, and here, and this is the reason for the change. So I would say that the Keystone system was built to do what it's supposed to do, but then through either lack of maintenance or no maintenance or decisions, I don't know what, but it started not doing what it was intended to do. So now, through the job description appeal, like, or description process, we're actually going in and surgically fixing the ones that are not where they were supposed to be. So either the job description completely changed, and some of them have, and some of them were just were undervalued. And the market supports that, other systems would support that. So I would say that the Keystone system, other entities use, is a good system, but it wasn't doing what it was intended to do, and I don't know where that happened. But I would say with this ongoing maintenance, we're actually going in and tweaking it or fixing those issues so it runs the best it can run.
Commissioner Storrow.
Thank you. And to Commissioner White's question, we've had a big turnover in HR. So things happened along the way that kind of fell by the wayside. So Allison was really given this huge job to start looking at all of that along with Keystone and along with DDA. Yeah. So we're kind of starting over again.
I wasn't suggesting that there's a fault anywhere. It was just how did this just start with the
I'm
Circumstances.
very open to using a different system. It's just, I don't think it would give us much of an advantage. It would just be another burden to try to work through.
Yeah.
But,
And you would still be at the same question as, do you have enough grades? Should you have a 270? Even if you used any of the other 19 systems that I am trained in, the classification system can only do the pointing. Then your grades are based off those points. And again, some have, 20, some have 25, some have 18. I have one that had 50 grades, and then you have to do that. You also, can decide on how many steps you have. So remember that the system does one piece, and then kind of where you want to be to the market, and that competitiveness decides the number of grades or the number of steps.
Any other questions for Tessa? Well, Tessa, we really appreciate you being with us this morning and this afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. And I will follow up with Allison and Rowan and get that information on the costing and the number of employees per grade. And if there's anything else that you guys have questions on or want more data, let them know, and I will work with them as a team and we'll get you the information you need.
Thank you so much. That will really help us as we move forward with our budgeting process and with our hiring process.
Perfect.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Tessa.
Thanks,
Thank
Tessa.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right.
I have a question, suggestion. Have we considered a hiring freeze?
no,
I don't think so.
why?
Well, we,
Like for what position exactly?
well, just like, let's get this. Are we getting value? And as I have said before, I believe we have really good employees. I mean, it's not any, but do we have the right amount of employees? Or do we not have enough, or do we have too many employees for the services that we provide? That's the question. And I don't know how to get an answer to that, but
I would.
for a county our size with 5,600 people, now 600, it's on a sovereign nation of Grand Portage who also has services for their, though we work together with that. But there are other considerations, like what is the health of our county that, and there are unfunded mandates and there are different things like that, and are we overstaffed? I know I always hear from Public Health and Human Services that we're understaffed and they're overloaded and things aren't getting done, so there's like, we're not doing well the way we are, it seems like. And if it's all about funding or housing, you know, wage or housing, then we need to do something about that. And we're not getting very far very quickly. So if we just say, okay, let's see if we can figure out how to, like, we have to get this budget down, and at this point, I'm not promoting cutting off our nose to spite our face, or however that goes. The employees are important, but we need to have the services for the taxpayers, and are they being delivered with, or do we need more employees, or do we have too many employees, or what is the problem that people leave all the time? I mean, there's all sorts of questions in there. That wasn't very straightforward, but what do the exit interviews say? Why do we have such a turnover?
Mhm. Well, I would say when people accept interviews, that's something that's identified in our strategic plan to work on. I currently do offer exit interviews to people that are leaving, like I did one last week for our dispatcher that just left. But the acceptance, they're not mandatory. I can't make someone do them. So I would say it's about half and half when we're actually able to get information from them. And people could accept or choose not to do exit interviews for their own reasons that we would never know. As to why people are leaving, I think there's a variety of different circumstances. James, for example, that was completely out of his control.
What about what do the exit interviews say?
Generally, there's not one consistent trend. And I think it very much depends on the position the person was in, their situation outside of work. I have people leave for health reasons and they love their job and would choose to stay, but they have things that they have to focus on for themselves first. People leave for other job opportunities. There's not a lot of room for progression and movement within public government. I've been lucky that I've been able to experience some of those movement patterns, but not everyone is able to, and so they leave for those reasons. But I wouldn't say there's one overwhelming factor as to why people leave. I think stress, I do hear stress, whether you work in county government or not. I think any job can be quite stressful, especially when we have open positions that remain unfilled, that extra work is on the shoulders of staff who already have a full plate.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that was a loaded question. You had a lot of loaded questions.
Well,
I think,
I'm trying to,
I think the picture, it's very complex. I don't think a hiring freeze would resolve anything. I think that would make it even worse. And as to whether we have too many staff, are we just right, are we too little? I think that's very hard to quantify. I think it depends on what kind of county we want to be, the culture that we want to provide, the services that we want to provide. Do we want to provide the bare minimum? Do we want to be reactive versus proactive? I think there's a lot of factors that go into that.
And turnover, you would know.
Mhm.
Is this common in other counties
Mm-hmm.
and businesses? Turnover is just, and so it might be a culture, a generational thing where people.
We tend to see that more in the, there's too many Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, I can't keep track of them. But there's definitely a shift. I would say it's more, I don't know, culturally accepted. identified with, I feel like our younger staff that we tend to see. I think that's not just us, I think it's just any job market, we tend to see people shifting jobs, career focuses quite a bit more often than, I mean, we don't see the Dusty Nelms or the David Eccles much anymore. Mhm, yeah.
Certainly, there's lots of counties that have turnover similar to ours. Going to the AMC website, and if you go in the jobs section, you can see all postings throughout the state of Minnesota.
And being in this end, being in an end, people can't drive to the next opportunity.
Right. You know, we have the extra challenge, which we know, which is housing. But there are other places that have that same issue as well. Ours is maybe exemplified a little bit.
Yeah. And again, we're competing, like Tessa said, with market competitiveness. When you can go work at Holiday or retail or work in a restaurant and earn the tips that then exceed the wages that we can pay. I think also there's a focus too of, I think people tend to live more paycheck by paycheck and what's that bottom line figure versus what are the benefits and the ability to save for retirement. So I think some of those thoughts have just shifted through the generations, and so when you can just get more money at the end of the day doing some of those other jobs, less stress, we can't necessarily compete for that.
Jana?
What's up?
Commissioner Johnson had shared this survey recently that I've been sharing with staff.
Good point.
By Citizens League, why are fewer Minnesotans choosing public service? So anybody who's worked in public or local government and those who have not, I've been sharing in the staff newsletter. But they're saying increasingly at nearly every level of government, Minnesota is facing a crisis. Fewer people are interested in public service. So, you know, Citizens League, they're doing a survey to try and find out more information about that. And so it's, I guess that shows it's not just here, you know.
Right.
Anyway, just wanted to remind people of that. If anybody is interested in a link to the survey, shoot me an email and I can send it your way. But I have shared in the staff newsletter, and I think I took it myself too. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that.
Thanks.
And we have we have an example in the West End with townships. We have 2 townships that is not full with staff. You need 3 supervisors. We have 2 townships that does not have that. Who's stepping up? Right now, somebody, that's a kind citizen said they'll step in for a while till there be an election. But that's, and they are paid, supervisors are paid, monthly, minimum. But it takes time. You have a meeting. We go to AMC, they have their meetings that they go to twice a year. And so, it's a different, as Allison said, we're in a different culture.
And it's been going on for a while, because I remember way back when Dan Shirley was I'll fill in and be the treasurer or something, and one more time I'll do this, and then it's like I can't anymore.
Right.
And so it's been ongoing. I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
All right, well, good discussion and more.
Well, I got the conversation going, so.
It's a good conversation. It's always going on in my head.
So Allison, we also want to talk a little bit about our recruitment for our HR generalist.
Yes. All right, so talking budget, looking forward to 2025. Also in our strategic plan, we do have a strategic initiative to, let me read it right here, invest in a highly trained, high-performing, and engaged workforce. And goal 2.1 is to increase our HR staffing from 1.5 FTE, so currently myself full-time and Kathy Polly's our half-time HR generalist, to 2.5 FTE. So we'd be looking at adding another full-time HR generalist. If you go in and look at the strategic plan, there are a lot of things that fall onto HR, also some with HR administration. And to do that, we need to, going off of not hiring freezes, but potentially add staff. We've talked about the turnover in HR over the last few years. There's been 2 HR directors over each serving a year and a half. That has transitioned, and then I took on the role. And that was kind of already in the discussion of, we know there's a need to add more staff. So in the strategic plan that the board approved, it does acknowledge that there is that need to increase our HR staffing by hiring another full-time HR generalist. So I've talked with Rowan, I talked to James before we left, and so we've been talking about, well, how can we go about this? Because in an ideal world, I would love to be able to recruit someone, start that process now. The process from posting to actually getting the person in, starting their first day is typically like a month and a half. So I would love it if I could begin that recruitment process and have someone starting right after the first of the year, an ideal world. However, discussions of like where would that person go is coming up in the conversation, because obviously we're short on space. I myself took over a conference room. There aren't a lot of other spaces, underutilized spaces that we could look at transforming and using those spaces. I'm working with Rowan, and I think he's having those discussions with Brooke. But what I wanted to talk with you all today is, if things do fall into place and having a spot, is it safe to start recruiting, knowing that the position still isn't technically approved? We don't have the approved budget for 2025, but we do have a strategic plan that does acknowledge the additional HR generalist position. So I can get a jump start on finding assistance for this position. I can easily say I don't have time to get to a lot of other things like policy development. My job, mine and Kathy's job, is primarily, just finished open enrollment, still a lot of left to do with that, and then a lot of recruitment, onboarding, offboarding is pretty much what this job does most of the time.
Commissioner Sterling.
So, Allison, we sit here, we have had no discussion on our budget. Kathy is part-time, three-quarters time?
Half-time, 20 hours a week.
Okay. And you want somebody then full-time,
Yes, it would be an additional full-time.
but not Kathy?
No,
No.
no, not Kathy.
Kathy as well.
She could apply.
Kathy could apply. She's not interested in
Yeah.
going full-time. So we would keep the 1.5 that we currently have and then add another full-time. So there'd be 3 people in the department,
The 2.5.
but 2.5 FTE.
This is in the new requests.
This is the list of new requests,
Right.
yeah.
That have been Since whenever.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, so I'm finally getting to a budget discussion here again, and I understand the need. I'm not denying the need, and I understand there were a lot of things identified in that strategic plan that was over a period of years that we want to be working on. There was a lot on that plan that got designated to HR. I'm also a believer in wants versus needs, identifying, realizing we have a budget that we still haven't gotten down to 5% when we've told the public we're gonna get to 5%. So I'm concerned about that. And actually, one of the things I wanted to I did ask, I think, but then with everything else, with James' situation, it probably got lost in the file. I totally understand. But I wanted to know, what if instead of going to 2.5 FTEs in HR, what if we went to 2? What would that cost be? And then maybe go to a half at a later time. Do this in steps and not all at once. I also wanted to know what things could be contracted out. What are we doing in HR that maybe doesn't have to be done by an employee right now? We hire DBA to do certain things. What else? Maybe. That was the background questions that I kind of had wanted to know. So I am not comfortable showing up at next Tuesday's meeting and saying, yes, we're going to put HR ahead of all the other requests we got. That's just my personal opinion. We need to talk about, yes, we need help and I'm not a proponent of a blanket hiring freeze in all departments, because that doesn't make sense. You only have 2 people in that department. So I get that. So I want to keep my options open, but I also want discussion about where is the best place we use our money this year, what can be put off to next year.
And if DDA is only $10,500 for all of the stuff that they do, that's a lot less expensive than an employee. I mean,
I don't know.
I'm just
I don't know what
talking,
they offer, so.
no, I know, and I don't,
Maybe it doesn't
but
work.
talking about outsourcing some of the tasks. Because, Molly here, we outsource some legal issues or help. And we don't, we should have a discussion about that.
I think probably James and Allison have looked at those options and come up with this. I think the recommendation for, like, those new requests are not all inclusive of the whole strategic plan. It's a very small subset. So that's already the prioritized list. Like, he's saying we need to keep our buildings going, right? We need another maintenance person, and also HR. If we don't have support, we're gonna lose another director. What does that cost us?
Well, I won't leave, but I will significantly reduce the services that I can
Well,
provide. Well, I hope I don't leave.
Well, right, I mean,
That was
the
not my
stress
goal.
compounds.
Yes.
And
yes.
we've seen it twice already
Right.
with highly skilled professionals. I have a lot of faith, confidence, and appreciation for the work you do, but you are not infinitely, your well is not infinitely deep. So I feel strongly about supporting the organization and the employees therein, and that is largely done through HR and the work that you do. And if we're not supporting HR, then we're not doing that. I feel the same way about our buildings. If we're not doing what we should be with our buildings, taking care and being proactive with them, our buildings are going to come to disrepair. And I mean, this is just like, it's a no-brainer to me. I feel like this last Tuesday, we worked through what our costs were, and I appreciate being able to, whittle it down as much as we can. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to hit our fund balance, and it's there. And that's taxpayer money, and it's there to use for the public, and that's what we're doing. It's not a sustainable thing, but it'll get us to the next phase, and we can bring the levy down to that 5%. That's an arbitrary number, but if we want to stick to that number, we can do that easily and still have a healthy fund balance, from what Brady said, and that's just using the one-time money. It's not even, using just fund balance, so.
Commissioner Johnson.
So speaking to that, using fund balance, the financial management plan that we saw didn't have any placeholders for a potential building, which is going to potentially cost $30 million. So if we are serious that we have a space problem that we need to solve, and we're thinking about spending fund balance for ongoing levy expenses, I want to see a placeholder. I don't care if it's 3 years down the road. You need to plug that number in and say, all right, what does that do to what does that do to the taxpayer 3 years, 4 years down the road? If you're only thinking about today, you're tying one hand behind your back.
Well,
You'll get there.
I'm thinking 30 years down the road is the way I'm thinking. It's not maybe to the detail that you want, but if you want to have a healthy community that far down the road, you got to start with the basics and have those structures in place. You got to support your children and families. You got to keep on your roads and bridges. You got to help those that are most in need, and that's how your long-term community is going to be healthy. So, but our first stage is the $6 million building, right? And so we can get through that, and then we're going to have to start looking at, yes, we're going to have to start looking hard. Other thing to note is we can bond for that, and that's not free or cheap. But we can do that. We can't bond for a lot of those requests that are the new requests. Those have to just come from levy or fund balance. So it's a complicated, long game, but it's very important. I'm not disagreeing. We need to look at that, and we need to have a roadmap, but we also need to make these steps that have been identified through our processes and through our organization, and take those steps in order to get anywhere. Otherwise, I just feel like there's a lot of paralysis oftentimes, and people are frustrated. Why aren't things happening faster, sooner? It's kind of the same old. Housing was identified a decade before, but nobody was willing to see like, all right, we're going to throw some money at this and build something. They're like, nope, we don't have the money for it. And then we get to here. And it's a similar story now, getting asked for housing dollars, and oftentimes we're like, well, maybe next year. It's just how it is every year. Not easier, but.
So I understand your thinking, and I appreciate that. I was in a meeting just yesterday that the subject came up about taxes and what can I afford in taxes. So we do, as commissioners, need to plan ahead and think ahead and not just think about, oh, let's provide this today. But we need to think about the impact for those who maybe struggle to live here. We've got a lot of people that moved in that have the money that, no big deal, get that. There's other families that live here that maybe are on set incomes. And this person said their assessed value tripled. I didn't look it up, but that kind of shocked me. But that has an impact when your neighbors, I know mine went way up, when your neighbors sell for a lot of money and you haven't done a thing, and your tax rate is also going up, you're paying more. And some people don't have the luxury to just have more income to make. And we already know there's inflation, there's other pressures out there. And this is where I'm saying we need to provide government services. We need safe roads. We need a law enforcement center. We need this building. We need employees. But there's a point that sometimes you don't do all great things, but you don't do them all today. You make a plan and say, we can do this now. This is what we want to do next, down the road, and you phase things in. So that's why I would like to know, are there things we can contract out without hiring more employees, which is ongoing expense?
So, Madam Chair, I would request that we get down to the nitty-gritty at our next board meeting. We only have 2 meetings after that. And I mean, really, nothing extra on the agenda other than if you have a time factor of somebody having to have an opinion or a resolution or a budget.
We've talked about that.
All
The
budget.
budget needs to be.
Budget. And then take everything that Brady's given us, because he's given us things every day this past week, and bring all that together, because I feel like it's out there like tentacles. But we gotta bring it together and say, as Commissioner Mills said, look at everything that we absolutely need, and then we could have some help with the general fund and the implications of that. We were given a gift from PILT,
Yeah.
and Brady kept it. And I think we can easily use some of it
Absolutely.
and put some
That's
of
what
it
it's
aside.
for.
Right.
That's its purpose.
One thing, we will have the tower issued back on our
Yeah.
agenda because that is time
Right.
Oh,
sensitive.
Yeah.
we have a
Right.
list
Yeah.
mapped out with all the remaining meetings that we have for the rest of the year.
And that's time sensitive too, yeah.
The before we move on from the HR agendas, I'm just curious, the information that Tessa provided today and the additional information that was requested of Tessa, And since we're moving forward with hiring a county administrator, is that something that the board wants to see as an agenda item on the 26th or at a later date? Our tentative timeline with DDA has you all interviewing with them on the 25th, as well as them requesting information like our salary information. And again, we have this request from a vendor, from a consultant, and we wanted to get it to you. I wanted to get it to you as soon as possible so that you have that information and to make a decision, and whatever that decision is.
I think it's really important for our posting, that we get that out for our county administrator as soon as possible. So I would like to see that on the agenda for our next meeting. What are other commissioners think? You know, it has budgetary implications, and I think it's important for us to make a decision.
I think after each one of us have visited on Monday, we'll have a better, broader understanding of what they're wanting and what we're wanting. So it could go on the next agenda after that. I don't know if we would be ready the next day to discuss anything, but.
But it would be then on the December 3rd.
Which also means that we would be holding on to other leadership job descriptions at the same time.
Right.
Can you be more explicit with what the ask is for the 26th? The updated pay table, if we want to move to 270?
So
Yeah.
Tessa kind of framed it up in 3 options as a recommendation. And I think it's either to do nothing and continue on the way we are and post and try to attract a county administrator at our current 260, and then say we're going to keep everything the same with the other department heads that are up for review, and if they score higher because of pay equity reasons, we're not going to put them higher. That's what option 1 is, right? So you'd say, you know, if a director scores a 260 or a 250, we're going to do pay equity and keep them where they are, even though they scored higher.
Mm-hmm.
And just move forward.
Can I just add that it's not pay equity, because we'd be treating them differently than we have the other staff and what we said we would do for our process.
Well, and when I say pay equity, I mean in terms of the way
The compression.
Well, in the way
Mm-hmm.
that Tessa has
Mm-hmm.
defined it so that we're eligible for those funds. You can't
Mm-hmm.
have somebody score higher than your
Right.
county administrator. That puts you in a position where
Certain
you-
parts of the pay equity, you're
Right.
saying, to
Yeah.
retain.
Yep. And, or do we create a 270 and do a 4% increase above a 260? Or do we create a 270 and do a 7% increase above a 260? Those are the 3 options that DDA put forward and want a decision on. And it ties in and relates to DDA's hiring for a county administrator for us, and it ties into budget conversations, as does what Eller's provided for us and potentially going forward with this. But I'm just trying to figure out what the board's thought would be there. How do we want to address that and when?
All right, thank you for clearing that up, because I don't think, so on the 25th, those interviews are going to be what we want to see, the qualities we want to see in an administrator. And I don't know that that's going to affect our decision on the grade scale. That's, I mean, grade scale is the grade scale, and what we're looking for in an individual is what our search involves. And so I think it should be on the Tuesday, the 26th agenda, because we got to make this decision.
We don't make that decision. We
Yeah.
can't post.
We,
We don't have a
basically,
salary.
basically.
Part of the timeline that, sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Okay.
I was just thinking aloud.
I was just going to say that part of the timeline that DDA proposed, that they brought forward, has November 25th, the meeting with all of you, but it also states in there, gather salary information and review the job description. So that's part of their timeline. And the reason why I'm asking if this is something that the board wants to address on the 26th is because that's as close as we're going to get to do that with this information that they brought forward. So we'd be telling them, you know, meet with everybody. Hopefully tomorrow I'll give you an answer on that salary information. if we don't, and we kick it down the road to early December 3rd, I believe is their next regular meeting there, that has a little bit, I think, we could check with Tessa or Pat. My concern is it has a little bit of a domino effect on their timeline.
All right, I'm thinking out loud again. All right. So, up until this discussion today, we were okay with the 260. We were going to post for a 260. So we could still post for a 260. We might not get any candidates. And then on December 3rd, we could say, no, let's go to a 270. I'm just saying, I don't want to rush this decision unnecessarily. I get it's probably better to start that way with what you want. But since we were all thrown into this unexpectedly, without any chance, I just don't want to rush a process without making sure we've had time to think about the pros and the cons. And since we were going to originally advertise for a 270, 260, sorry. Anyway, I'm okay staying there until, let's have our discussions on Monday. Let's see if what happens, what do we think? And let's put it December 3rd. We're gonna have this discussion again and decide, do we wanna stay with what we're at, or do we wanna change it? But give us some time to process and make sure we understand all the implications. Because this is gonna take some time to gather that information, I'm guessing. So there's my thoughts on the cuff, and I don't like to do that, but there you go.
Well, I guess I'm still not clear, like what, Tessa laid out all the implications pretty well, I thought, in that table with all the pluses and minuses. And essentially, if we don't go to the 270 and keep it at 260, all of the other leadership positions are held below that 260. And there's even more compression, and it's an artificial capping of positions, which would, I mean, the implication is lead to more turnover.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wrote down here needing to do and check on is when we did this pay study analysis, we had this. We had the low-level positions, some way undervalued. We had some of the high-level positions way overvalued. I'm wondering where we're at now. And I don't remember what our administrator or our auditor, or I don't even know which, right now off the top of my head, which positions are still out there, that upper level positions. But I want to see that. What did we say, how far off were we on that? Or is this, what's causing this? So.
Yeah, I don't think it was overvalued, it was the steps, because we had a number of high-level positions who had been here for 25 years, and they get longevity, and so their pay was much higher than, say, your average starting pay there, but I don't think we have overpaid positions. I think going through the job descriptions like they have kind of confirmed where things should be and bumped some up and held some, where they're at. I could be wrong there. That's just how I am understanding.
I don't remember. I just remember the chart and knowing there were peaks and valleys.
But so that's where I'm like, I'm confused as to what the confusion is.
I feel like we should make a decision next Tuesday.
Well, we should certainly talk more about it and have the information for us. I'd like to make a decision Tuesday. If we're not ready, we're not ready, but having on the agenda, I think is important. But then it gets in the way of the budget, and this is directly related to the budget, so.
Exactly. That's why I think we need to decide it, because it has implications.
And then Allison, when you post, when the position is posted, and you post the range of what the salary would be, is that correct?
For which position? Any
Uh,
position?
No, the administrator.
Oh, well, we would.
Based on-
We would
based
post
on
it
the
based on what TDA
experience.
says. Yes.
Based on the experience
Mhm.
and the education and that the applicant has. And so this is a question. And so does what is offered to the applicant say, we like this guy, but he really doesn't know how to do contracts, which is absurd, but, just something. So would we offer him a lower rate? I mean, instead of offering 25.75, something in the, I mean, do we offer him the 260 rate? And then if the person's not worth it, we shouldn't be offering the job in the first place. But, if a person comes and they don't have what we are looking for, then we should go out and try to find someone else. And if that person is just everything we could dream of, and then in the conversation, asking them about the pay rate, what do you feel about this? And in their honesty, they would say, seems a little low, but we've always wanted to live here. Would we have the latitude as a board at that point to say, we are adjusting this and we are thinking about adjusting the pay rate for this position, so you know this?
Yes. So there's multiple factors involved in that. So, well, first, I haven't experienced having to post for a county administrator, and I think
Right.
a lot of that will be directed by DDA and how we post for that. But thinking about other positions that we post for, like recent department level positions, we've had a lot of turnover in those. So typically, when we post for the positions, we post the pay range usually for that grade, for that position, from like a step 1 to a step 3, because we try to usually stay within those first few steps when we offer someone, when we do the negotiation for their starting wage. Now, we have had positions, I'm thinking most recently in Public Health Human Services, where we were recruiting for positions where those job descriptions were going through the review process. And like the office support specialist, case aides. So they were going through the process, they were graded a 130, and then they ended up being regraded at a 140. So we did make that clear when we were doing interviews, or we had identified that specific candidate, like, hey, disclaimer, this job is going through our job description review process, which includes a review of the grade. There is a potential that you may see a different wage versus what we start at, because you can start at with whatever the grade is currently approved with that job description, right? But give the disclaimer, and we could probably do that with the county administrator too. If we want to start recruiting at the 260, say this is the starting wage, but then just have that discussion with the candidate saying, we're going through this process, it could potentially change. I think I understood.
Yes.
Did I answer that?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
But I still worry, I know the focus is on the county administrator position, but I still worry I have a handful of department head positions that are going to be held up by this. And I worry about the internal equity and the fairness for them too, which for me is a little bit more of the reason for the urgency in trying to resolve this, because I don't think that they should be treated differently than we've treated the other staff that have already gone through this process.
The one thing about going with a professional hiring company is that they sort this out. So they will have candidates that will be the closest to our offering that's possible. I mean, that's what they've done in the past. Tuesday, let's all meet with our DDA on Monday and have a discussion on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Not make a decision maybe, but maybe we
Put it
can,
on the agenda.
in regards to the job description, the holdup that we're having with other folks, and then we can decide, okay, we move forward or we don't yet. Just discuss it, okay?
On the agenda. Got it.
On the agenda.
Okay. Yay.
All right. Well, with that, we have our minutes of our standing committees, and we are adjourned. We have budget information.
if they do, most likely they will, because I've said every job description is different.
Talking to
them
them
step.
Monday.
Will we have